You're listening to Love Talk Live with the relationship expert, Jaime Bronstein, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hi, and welcome to Love Talk Live. I'm Jaime Bronstein, your host, and today I have two lovely ladies, one here with me, Susan King.
Hi, Jamie. Nice to be here.
So happy to have you.
Thank you.
And on the phone, we have Danielle Tobias. Are you there, Danielle?
I am. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you. So we'll be bringing Danielle on a little bit later. She's a social worker that lives in Chicago. And this is Susan King. She is an intuitive who is in town from London, as you can see.
By my accent.
And hear her amazing accent. And she's truly an amazing person. And I'll just kind of let you tell your story. We can just kind of start there.
Okay, you want me to give you a rundown of how I got to where I am today?
Yeah, we'd love to hear.
Okay, when I was a child, I used to get very strong sense of different things around me, even as a 3-year-old. I used to get strong likes and dislikes of people, and I used to get smacked for being so vocal about them. As I grew up and into my early teens, I used to have dreams, but I'd have dreams that would actually happen and manifest. So after I'd finished college, I started to work in the pharmaceutical industry because I've always had an interest in anything to do with the mind, the body, and the spirit. And I'm also very interested in the anatomy and physiology of the body. But in my early 20s, I had a little bit of a car accident. It was a cold, icy morning. The sky was blue, the birds were tweeting. I went down a slight gradient in the road. The car went out of control, upside down and twisted around, and I had a headache for 5 days, after which I started to see mental pictures and images in my mind's eye. And it took me 5 years to decipher what I was actually seeing. It was quite a process. And from that, I started to see pictures and images around people who I was with. So I decided I was going to completely change my life, and I was going to work using this ability. I didn't actually know what to call it at the time, but the reason I use the word intuitive is because every human being I possess, we possess different senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and instinct and intuition is part of those senses. And so I once read an article in Fortune 500, what was the common denominator amongst America's top 10 most successful men? Their gut, their instinct, their intuition. But over the last 25, 30 years, my intuition has developed to the point where when I sit and I focus on a person or an object, even an email, I receive mental pictures and images in my mind's eye. And one of the things that I can use this ability for is looking into relationships. One of the main things that I find that people come to me for, they want to understand the psyche of the person who's just thrown them at one side or doesn't see things the way they do. And that's one of the little strengths I have, is being able to look at that and explain to them why the person that they're with has that behavior pattern. And so basically, that's how I'm here today with you.
Wonderful. One thing I just want to make sure, because we can't really check in with our guests, but you have so much to say. I want to make sure that they can hear you. So if you just
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, a little bit closer. We don't want to do the whole show and then be like, oh, I could just kind of hear her.
Sorry.
So yeah, so much better. Okay, so I love that you mostly work with love.
I do, yes.
And that's my passion, and that's what this show is all about. So could you tell us a story, an example of somebody who came to you that something about like what you were just talking about. They kind of weren't sure about what the other person was thinking or feeling, and then you kind of gave them insight into...
Okay, let me see, out of the catalogue. Okay. For example, let's take Lydia, call her Lydia. Lydia came to see me because she'd been in a relationship for the last 3 or 4 years, and she wanted to take it one step further. And she couldn't understand why her significant other, Tony, was very reluctant to move forward. And they were having consistent arguments and bickering and going through all of this. And it was getting to the point, after almost a year of this bickering, that she felt she wanted to throw the towel in. She'd had enough. So she came to see me and she explained this, and then I said, I want to see a photograph of this young man. So when I looked at the photograph of the young man, the images that I got in my mind's eye were, I could see him as a small boy between the ages of 6 and 12. In his life at that time, there was an incredible amount of trauma. One of the parents was either taking drugs or alcohol. I don't know which. All I knew, there was a terribly erratic personality. And I felt that since that young age, this person had been incredibly emotionally insecure. So they'd gone into their teens with all of this stuff locked in their psyche. And it's not that this person didn't want to be with her. He wasn't sufficiently aware of why his feelings were the way they were, or why he had this block. And I said to her, if she was patient, and if she tried to talk to him and try and understand why he felt the way he did, and talk about his family, his home, his father coming and going, and all the highs and lows of moods that he'd had in his young teens, that they would be able to understand each other, and they would have a better understanding of why she was the way she was towards him, and vice versa. So it's kind of like, you can't judge a book by its cover. You have to look into the pages, and if you look into the pages, there's always something, and there's always a trigger that sets something off. That's just one example of a situation like that I've encountered. But I get that kind of thing happening all the time.
So do you know what happened? Did they ever follow up with you?
Oh, no, they do follow up. Yes, they do follow up. Some people follow up and they're fine. Some people follow up and they're not so fine. Some people are very impatient and want things to happen like yesterday. But when you're dealing with human beings and you're dealing with the minute emotions of people, you have to give and take, and you have to be patient, because I always tell people, think of the mountain goat. The mountain goat goes up sheer faces, 1 foot in front of the other. And I kind of think life's like that. We can't jump from the bottom to the top.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to just trust that there's a plan out there.
Absolutely.
And
a process.
And if we try to do anything to rush something, it just never ends up good. It's just not a good situation.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you help your clients kind of just relax into the flow.
Correct. I give them clarity, and I help them see a different perspective of the situation than what they've been seeing it before. And so that makes them be a little bit more patient. And when you have a bickering situation going on, it's very difficult for the other person to share their vulnerabilities. For a person to share their vulnerabilities, they have to feel peaceful and they have to feel safe. And the one thing that I think a lot of, especially women, and I'm a woman and I've done it myself years ago, we tend to think, if he really loved me, he'd know what was wrong with me. If he really did. So many people say that all the time, and it's so true.
Oh, God. Men cannot read our minds.
No, they can't.
As much as we would want them to.
No, but it's true, but a lot of people tend to think that.
They do, until we teach them.
And that's absolutely. Totally agree with you.
So I'm wondering, have you, now, in this day and age, there's lots of dating with apps and things like that, and on the websites, and a lot of times people come to me and they say they're so frustrated because they go on these dates and the people show up and they don't look anything like they did, or they're not anything like the way that they describe themselves. So I'm wondering, have you had any situations where you've been able to kind of stop someone in the tracks, where someone comes to you before maybe they meet the person, and there's can avoid the fraud?
Well, one thing springs to mind. It was actually in 2014, November, when I was last here in LA. I went to meet my friend outside the M Cafe in Beverly Hills, and I sat down, and she was glowing like a Christmas tree, even though it wasn't Christmas. And I said to her, "What's happened?" "I'm in love," she said. "Oh, really?" Went in to get my food. I sat there. I said, "Okay, tell me the story." So she said to me, "I've met this guy online. He's from Iceland. He's Icelandic. He was married. He has 2 teenage children, but his wife was having an affair with his best friend. So he divorced her, and he left Iceland, he came to California. He spent quite a bit of time in California, and then he met this woman who was about 10 years older than him. And he was an architect, so they decided they were going to do projects together. So I'm sitting intensely, noshing on my food. Yes, go on, I said. Anyway, this journey had taken them to Turkey because apparently this woman had some Turkish origin and they had apartments and different buildings they wanted to renovate because Turkey's becoming very in vogue with, vacations. So there they were in Turkey, and they'd been there on and off for 10 years, and then the lady died that he was with. So there he was. He put the house in California on the market for sale, and he told my friend that I'll be coming back to the US in a few weeks. This conversation they'd been having on the phone for maybe 6-7 weeks. And when she told me this story, she looked so happy and so gleaming in her eyes, and I thought to myself, I don't believe a word of it. So I thought, I have to say something. So I said, I don't believe it. I have never seen such a look in my life. The bottom dropped out of her face. And I said, I tell you what, when is he coming? She said, 3 weeks. I said, tell him to send you a copy of his airplane ticket. Sure enough, she did. He sends the airplane ticket. He actually sent a ticket with her. It was a ticket that went from Istanbul to Schiphol in Amsterdam to Atlanta to LA. $3,000 on the top of the ticket. I said, go and ask your friend, the travel agent, if the ticket's authentic. Sure enough, the ticket was authentic, but it was cashed in the next day.
My God.
So then she was beginning to think, oh, okay, hold on, okay, maybe I'm right. So I said to her...
Wait, was this a personal friend or someone you just randomly met at the
Oh,
hotel?
no. This is somebody that I know. I know. I mean, I don't know them that well in the sense that I'm with them every day, but if I come to LA, I see them, or if they are in London, I see them. And I hadn't seen this person since May. We hadn't spoken since May, maybe the odd text. So I said to her, the next thing that's coming is the money. Sure enough, he had to get $5,000. He couldn't get the money out of his bank account in Turkey. It was a bit of a problem. So then it stopped her. She had nothing else to do with him. But I was watching, I was in New York in January, and they were saying that, as it was Valentine's Day that was coming up, they were saying there's such a lot of fraud now on the internet, especially on these dating sites. And it's people's vulnerability. The more vulnerable you are, it's not that people don't understand or can't make sense. It's people who are very emotionally vulnerable when they desperately have this huge emotional need that needs filling. And what I say is their need to be wanted outweighs their logic.
Right, absolutely.
And that's a typical case. I mean, I come across that sort of thing all the time. Not usually face to face. It's usually, on the phone or on Skype when I'm working.
But you were right there.
Absolutely, yes. But it sticks in my mind. And because I know her and because she was so happy, I felt such a saying that to her. But I had to say it.
Well, it's another way of doing tough love.
Absolutely.
You had an important message to give to her.
Yes, and I did, but it proved to be right as well.
This is very inspirational for me because I do talk to my clients all the time about using their intuition with everything. But specifically, I'm going to have them now maybe even more like when it comes to online dating to really use their intuition and to not let their need to be with someone outweigh, like, block their senses.
The logic.
Basically, yeah.
Another thing that is very good in my experience with what I do, if people go on a date, first date, second date, they're usually, especially if they like the person, they're all aglow like a Christmas tree again. But if they sit quietly 48 or 72 hours later, they sit quietly in a chair and they close their eyes and they rerun the video in their mind from when they met the person, the conversations they went through, things will hit them. If they're listening to their inner voice, things will hit them about that meeting, about, how the person was, odd words that they said. And they can actually learn a lot from that. Because I do believe we register everything subconsciously. Sometimes I practice it. I walk up the street, and when I get to the end, I go through my head exactly what I've seen on the street. Just because, I know that subconsciously I'm registering everything that I'm observing around me, and when I'm walking ahead.
And the cool thing about intuition in general is that we all have it. It's just a matter of
we do. We
tapping
do have
into it. I say it's kind of like a muscle. We need to practice it in order for it to get stronger.
Absolutely. It's like, tennis players, they play tennis all the time and they strengthen their arm and the muscles in their arm, and it's exactly the same. It's getting confidence in what you're actually sensing and feeling.
Yes.
That is the key. It's having confidence. Yes. And I always think if you have a little book and you feel something and you jot it down and you can refer back to it, it gives you confidence when you are right.
Yeah, like validation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So can you tell us a story about something that happened in your life where you, let's say, had an intention to manifest something, some person, anything, and you did it just kind of by using your intuition and setting an intention?
I don't actually set intentions, to tell you the truth. I don't sit and manifest things in the sense that I have a friend in New York, Annie, and she manifests things all the time, but it's not something that I usually do. However, I can tell you an instant when I've actually been in a situation where I've met someone and I've known instinctively. It's not manifestation. 20 years ago, I was invited to a dinner at the House of Lords. I went to the dinner, perfectly normal evening, summer's night, end of May, on the banks of the Thames, huge long tables, 100 people. Walked outside, crowd of people, everyone's waiting for cabs going by, and I got a tap on my left shoulder, and I turned round, and there was a man behind me on the telephone, and I looked into his eyes, and I knew I'd marry him, just like that. I mean, what told me? I have no idea. It was like a bolt from the blue. Oh, but that's what happened. I didn't manifest that. I wasn't looking for anybody. It just happened. But I felt certain. Absolutely certain.
But do you know what's so interesting about what you're saying?
Yes.
With the work that I do, I would like to argue that actually you did manifest it, but not intentionally. Yes. Because there was a part of your soul that wanted to get married and wanted to meet this man. You didn't say, I need to meet him by this time on the 10th. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that you did
maybe
manifest
subconsciously
him.
that I didn't realize I was doing it.
Yeah. Like it was like you got to the point in your life where you had done your work and you were open to it, let's say, and then there you were and someone brought you guys together.
Yes, I believe that happened. I do agree with that. But I wasn't consciously doing it, but subconsciously that could very well be. Yeah, I'm a great believer in that. But it was an extraordinary happening, and it was the 18th of May, and it's the 18th of February, so it's quite auspicious. And his birthday was the 18th of January. That's quite amazing.
Oh my God.
18, 18, 18.
And 18 in Jewish, let's say, it means chai. It means life, and it's good luck.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So 18, and I didn't really realize this until just now also that we were doing this today.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But I just think that I love hearing stories when people tell me where they just had this knowing. And you, in that moment, even before you spoke to him, do you hear that?
Yes, I did. I don't know what that is or was.
Danielle, are you there?
Hello?
Oh, you're there. Okay.
You're still there.
We heard a beeping.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Okay, good. Anyhow, I think that's so cool that you had that knowing. Wow. Very powerful.
It was.
I love it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to Danielle, and I think that this could be interesting after we go through Danielle's story to maybe, bring you back in to see like what we all kind of have to say.
Okay.
Danielle. Yes, and absolutely I want to add in, Susan, thank you for sharing everything that you shared. I think you said a couple of things that will relate closely to kind of my story and that whole sense of that emotional security and our perspectives, how we view things, and how once we're able to kind of switch the way we view other things and the way we see it could really affect kind of what happens in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I feel like, because I know your story, which you're going to tell now, it definitely coincides a lot with what we were just talking about, so that's great. So, Danielle, can you tell us what you do, and first professionally, because we'll get back to that later, and then tell us your story about you and your boyfriend. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me is I graduated from Loyola with my master's degree in social work. And currently I'm working as a school social worker in a junior high. So I get to work with the preteens and adolescents, which is very interesting. But kind of a little bit about my story. I'm going to give you a little background, kind of set the stage so everyone knows kind of where I'm coming from. So right now I'm in a relationship with someone named Alex. And we both went
I've
to the
met him.
university.
He's amazing. Just wanted to say that for the viewers. He's a wonderful man.
Yes, he is.
Go on.
He is a great guy, and he's actually sitting right next to me right now and watching a little bit.
Hi, Alex.
But so we both went to the University of Missouri, and at the time of this story, Alex was a junior and I was a sophomore, and we were both part of the Greek life. So I was in a sorority and Alex was in a fraternity, and our houses were right next to each other. So not even across the street. You could walk outside of my sorority house and his house was right there. We actually grew up 10 minutes away from each other and had some friends in common. But until this story, we have never met. So I'm going to fast forward to spring break of my sophomore year. And I had decided to go to Cancun with one of my best friends, Kristen, also along with a lot of other people from Missouri. So after a long flight in, my friend Kristen and I, we checked in with the hotel, we got our keys, and as we were about to open the door into our hotel room, a bunch of guys came up to us and they're like, "What are you doing?" And we were very confused. We were like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Oh, well, actually, this is where our friend is staying." And we're like, "This is the keys that they gave us." And as we walk in, we see this guy with a towel around him just kind of lounged on the bed. And we're like, "What is going on?" So as you could imagine, you're going into a hotel room with your friend and you think it's just going to be the two of you, and you walk into this guy that you do not know with a towel, and he's in one of your beds, and we're like, what is going on? Also, a little tidbit at that time, I was in a relationship with somebody else, so I also felt very uncomfortable sharing a room with a guy, specifically a stranger who I had never met. So my friend Kristen and I, we had gone up to the hotel receptionist and we asked, what's going on? Is there any other room? It's supposed to just be the two of us. And they said, sorry, spring break, there's nothing we can do about it. So we ended up rooming with this random guy who we had no clue who it was, but it actually ended up being one of Alex's best buddies from Mizzou, who was actually in his fraternity. So that's how I met Alex, and at that time I remember meeting him and being very drawn to him. And I'm not that kind of person where I see somebody and I'm like, I like them, or I get the butterflies in my stomach. It takes me a little while to kind of build that relationship with others. So it was a really weird feeling, especially, kind of going back, like I had a boyfriend, so I wasn't expecting to kind of have these butterflies in my stomach for somebody, but can't really pinpoint what it was, but I just really instantly liked him. So shortly after we got back from our spring break trip, my boyfriend at the time and we broke up, and I remember telling my friends and my mom, like, I think I kind of like Alex. I could never fully commit. I couldn't say I liked him. I had to throw in the kind of, because it was not like me to let anyone know I liked anybody unless I seriously liked them. It was kind of a big commitment for me to say that. So anyways, Alex and I would occasionally hang out, and he would subtly let me know that he liked me. He would kind of tell my friends, like, oh, are you with Danielle? Like, you should bring her over to the fraternity. And obviously at that time I had really liked him, but I didn't want him to know. So nothing really serious came out of it. Alex then ended up, because he's a year older than I am, he ended up graduating and got into a relationship with another girl outside of, Missouri, and we had just lost touch. But there would be times that I would just be thinking, he would pop into my head, and I'm like, I wonder what Alex is doing, what's going on. But for me, I would never text him first. For all I knew, he was dating somebody else, which he was, but I didn't know that. So I kind of just backed off, although I was kind of wishing that something more could have came out of it. And then it wasn't until I graduated college and I had moved to Chicago that we ended up bumping into each other at a friend's party. And then honestly, after that, the rest is history. We started a relationship and we've been together ever since then. But it's just talking about this kind of like our intuition and also the coincidences. Like everything happens for a reason. The fact that we live 10 minutes away from one another, we share friends in common, and we ended up bumping into each other at a friend's party. So it's kind of, relates back to what Susan was saying, that things happen for a reason, and sometimes we register things subconsciously that we're not even aware of.
So what do you think that you were doing differently in your life when you met Alex that was different from your previous relationships or just your dating experience before Alex?
Yeah. So kind of reflecting, using some like self-reflection and looking back, I think at that time in my life in college, I had like an intense, almost irrational fear of rejection. And that was something that throughout my whole life I kind of experienced. And I didn't really know when we talk about manifestation, like where that came from. There's not like a point in my life where it's like, this was kind of traumatic and this happened, but I really had this deep fear of getting rejected. So I used to live my life like tiptoeing around and avoiding situations that could potentially lead me to, my fear becoming a reality. And as you can imagine, that impacted my ability to form relationships. So when you think about liking somebody, what do? You want to be around them all the time, and you want to text them, you want to see where they are and what they're doing. And for me, it'd be the complete opposite. So if I liked somebody, I kind of had formed these unwritten rules and kind of held onto this belief that if a guy liked me, he would always text me first, and that, he always had to be the one putting in more effort. And if at any point I was putting in the effort, I would pull away because I felt like, well, he couldn't like me if I have to put in any of the effort. So I had these unrealistic, irrational beliefs that were preventing me from being able to put myself out there and form those healthy, reciprocal relationships.
So for the viewers, what can you tell them in terms of inspiring them? Did you have a shift? Because you must have done some kind of self-work or something to where you got to the point where you even could manifest Alex and you were able to have this relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is kind of a point in time that I can pinpoint, and it was while I was in graduate school. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, Jamie, that you learn about different therapeutic modalities.
Yes.
And as we were learning about a therapeutic modality called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, it really helped provide me insight into what I was doing and the reasons why I was doing it. And being able to have that kind of psychoeducation and that insight into like my behaviors and the way I was acting as a result of something, it really helped me look at that. So kind of for, people listening who don't really know what CBT is it pretty much looks at how one's thoughts affect their feelings, both physically and emotionally, which then affects how they behave. So to simply put it, the way we think impacts how we feel, and also how we act. So, people with anxiety, they usually engage in something, and this is absolutely what I was doing, was engaging in this negative self-talk. And I was having these irrational beliefs about, Alex and what he was doing and how that was, relating to the way that I thought about myself and the way that I used that negative self-talk. So kind of what I would do and really the way that I was able to change my outlook. And it's not that my fear of rejection completely went away. I think that's unrealistic. I think I still struggle with that in my daily life. But what really helped is kind of looking at those irrational beliefs and the thinking traps that we fall into as human beings. So one of the strategies that I really used was something called the reframing. Mm-hmm. So it's really changing the negative way that we think into a more positive or realistic way of talking to ourselves. So I'm going to kind of give an example, a personal example, and this is kind of a therapeutic modality I use with my students all the time, but I'm going to use the example based off of the story that I told you. So let's say there was a time that Alex didn't text me. my mind would automatically go into, he doesn't like me, there's something wrong with me. So imagine having that thought versus having the thought of, oh, Alex didn't text me, he may be busy right now and he'll text me later. Of course, the way that you're going to feel based off of those two, versions of self-talk are going to be different. The first one will lead me to feel upset and sad and feel like I'm not worthy of a relationship, versus the second one is, okay, what's more realistic? Is it more realistic that he's busy or that he just doesn't like me? So really being able to take a simple concept, which is that negative self-talk, and trying to reframe it into something more positive. And then one other strategy that really had helped me kind of move past this fear that I was having is something called cognitive restructuring. And so what that is identifying that irrational belief you have and then also disputing it. So again, let's go back to that, he didn't text me because he doesn't like me. So I would have identified that negative belief, and then I would have to dispute it. So I would look for examples for, the evidence showing that he doesn't like me, and then also again. Then really being able to use that in my daily life kind of helped push me out of that negative perpetual self cycle that I was in, and allowed me to think of it in a more positive way and put myself out there. And I think that really allowed me to kind of move forward in my relationship with Alex and not put all the pressure on him, because that's not realistic. Relationships have to be reciprocal, and if they're not going to go anywhere. So that's kind of how I, the change that happened from college, how I kind of perceive things in college, to kind of my perception and the way I thought of myself, and how I looked at myself as a person, which helped me, kind of facilitate that healthy mutual relationship.
Well, I love that you were able to do that, because not everybody does this. Everybody's capable of doing it. And I think that people think that it's a lot harder to do, but it really is pretty simple. Just changing that negative self-talk, getting rid of your past stories, and creating what your real story is, your authentic story is, and just living life from that place. I think your story is very inspirational. I hope that our viewers are watching, listening. How can people contact you if they just have questions or just want to send you an email?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way probably to contact me would be on Instagram, which would be under my name. It's Danielle, which is DANIELLE, Tobias, TOBIAS, and the number 1. Or on Facebook under just Danielle Tobias.
Okay, wonderful. And I don't want to forget to mention that if there are any Chicago people that have children who need help, because you work with children, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To contact Danielle.
Yeah.
And maybe you could work with these children, and then eventually they get older, and then they get into a relationship, so you could be like their lifelong therapist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, the techniques that I talked about, those could be helpful for anybody. And really people who are struggling with anxiety, it really does give them that language to understand what they're going through and how their thoughts really do affect the way they're feeling inside, and therefore how they are going to behave.
If I may say something, Danielle, I totally agree with you. But for people who can't have cognitive behavioral therapy, what they could say to themselves is they could look at themselves in the mirror and say to themselves, what is the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing? You're going to get a no, you're going to get a rebuff. How many no's have you had in life, or how many rebuffs have you had? So put your best face on and go forward.
And also just trusting that whatever the outcome is
it's okay.
The right outcome for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Susan, like what you said is really looking, and that's part of cognitive restructuring. What's the worst case scenario that could happen? And like you said, you get rejected, and that's part of life. And I think
Absolutely.
I also want everyone to know that it is going to be something that happens, and how we are able to cope with that is very important too. But you don't want, a fear, something that you fear, to stop you from doing something. And I think going over that worst case scenario, and really like rationalizing to yourself, like, it's going to happen, but when it happens, what can I do, and what's the worst outcome of it happening?
And if you never put yourself out there or take any chances, you will be alone. Like, if your fear is being alone, but you're also scared to get into a relationship because what if it ends? Then you're alone anyway. So it's really important to take chances and put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
So let's see, we have a few more minutes. Danielle, do you have any questions for Susan? Susan, do you want to add any more sprinkles of insight into anything before we finish?
Well, I would like to say, as far as relationships are concerned, when you go into a relationship, before you make any assumptions, be open, listen. A relationship, I believe, needs to be a part of the picture of your life, not the whole of your life. I think a lot of people tend to think that if they have a relationship, everything's going to be wonderful.
Right.
And that's not the case. I always say to people, if you look at the picture on the wall, there's all sorts of different colors on the picture. And, you have your work, you have your friends, you have your relationship, it's part of. But I think a lot of people expect the whole relationship to mend every aspect of their life, and I don't think it does. I think also that you need to listen to people very carefully and let people open up as they want to. I don't think you should go in with a checklist of 20 questions when you first meet somebody, because if I always say this to people as well, if you pick up sand in your hand and you let it rest in your hand, it will stay there. If you squeeze it, it will run through. And if you keep squeezing a person that you encounter, they will actually go backwards from you.
Yeah, they'll retreat.
Yes, yes, anybody would.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah,
Great advice. Love it.
Thank you.
So we already went over how we can find Danielle. How can we find Susan King? If anybody has any questions or wants to set up an appointment, do you want to talk about kind of how you do that from London?
Yes. If anybody's looking for me, you can find me at susankingintuitive@gmail.com or my website, susankingintuitive.com. I work in New York, I work here, and I work in London. So if you want to get hold of me, it's quite simple, susankingintuitive@gmail.com.
And you do phone sessions?
I do
Zoom,
phone sessions, I do
Skype.
Skype sessions, I do FaceTime sessions, I do WhatsApp sessions on all different time zones.
She's available. Sometimes she does it in the middle of the night if she's talking to Australia.
Sometimes, yes, absolutely. That's one of the most difficult things, is if you're talking to Australia and then you're talking to Bahrain and then you're talking to Miami, it's very difficult to gauge the time. I have to admit, once or twice I mix the times up.
And when do you sleep?
Oh, I do sleep. I like my sleep.
Sleep during the day or just a few hours here and there?
No. I always get my 7.5, 8 hours every night. I think that's very important.
Yes.
Because if you don't sleep, then and you're tired, it can make you very down. And you eat more because your energy's low, so you want to do something to energize. So no, I do like to get my sleep. I feel that's very important. And it's very important for making decisions. You don't make decisions when you're tired or you're weary. And if you have any issues emotionally or relationship-wise to talk about, you don't do that when you're tired. You do it when you're alert, when you're calm, when you're focused.
Yeah, your hormones get all mixed
Absolutely,
up.
especially when you
emotions.
fly, especially when you're flying.
Oh.
Going through different time zones. Yeah, I always have a few days in whatever city I'm in order for my I exercise and I sleep. To make sure that my mind and my body are all in sync.
To get the energy flowing.
Yes, absolutely.
In a beautiful way that it's supposed to.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So Danielle, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I think everything that has been said is very insightful. Susan, it's great to hear that you're able to work in Australia with all different time zones. I think that's very impressive. But thank you for sharing everything that, all your knowledge, and it's been very insightful to me. And Jaime, thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for being on the show. I thought that this, it always kind of just works out, the people that I have on the show at the same time, where it's just very synergistic and meant to be. So thank you both.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jaime, and nice to meet you, Danielle. Maybe when I'm in Chicago in May, maybe we'll have a coffee.
Oh, yeah. You guys can meet.
That would be awesome. I would love to.
So thank everybody for tuning in today. And as always, you can find me at therelationshipexpert.com. You can email me at jamie@therelationshipexpert.com. That's JAIME @therelationshipexpert.com. So we will see you next week, and have a wonderful week, a wonderful evening, and just love. Just love.
You're listening to Love Talk Live with the relationship expert, Jaime Bronstein, only on LA Talk Radio.